Before we continue, understand this podcast is for adults only and refers to relationships and activities between adults which are voluntary and consensual. If you or anyone you know is being abused, coerced, or violently aggressed against, please reach out for help to the appropriate authorities. To the Gorean Voice podcast. Each week I explore a topic from the Gorean novels which I personally find interesting, or an aspect of living a Gorean inspired, or Gorean adjacent lifestyle here on Earth. Tal, hello and welcome. Gorean Voice episode 24, Online Gore. I went for a funny one this morning, so I'm going to look at a few of the online ways that people try to relate to each other in a Gorean fashion. So as I mentioned before, I first discovered gore through an uncle's bookshelf when I was a touch too young. This was fine. While I found the books and their arguments compelling, I filed it away in the back of my mind for half a dozen years, until I reached the age where I'd be needing to think seriously about women. Around that time, though, I discovered a website called the Silk and Steel Tavern. I poked around this website for a while, and it seemed to be referring to a real physical location where people essentially interacted in a Gorean fashion. There were guides on etiquette, etc., which piqued my curiosity. I didn't exactly have all the time in the world to poke around, so I left it alone, and for a few weeks, while at school, during sports, training, at work, etc., I contemplated the implications of finding a real-life Gorean location. It was good to know that I wasn't the only man on Earth who was interested in living Gorean. When next I had time on my hands, as well as a free phone line for my dial-up internet connection, I checked the website out again and read a little more thoroughly. I was rather disappointed to learn that this Silk and Steel Tavern was located not in our physical world, but was essentially a chat room where people typed out their actions and dialogue in a sort of role-play of a Gorean Paga tavern. So it wasn't really my jam. In fact, I had some pretty negative thoughts towards roleplay of that sort, and I must admit I still do. I don't know what percentage of my audience has engaged in such roleplay, and if someone would like to enlighten me, I'm all ears. For the moment, though, I didn't see the appeal a quarter century ago, and I still don't. I've read that the internet is something like 30 to 50% porn, and that porn production and consumption has been at the forefront of many information technology innovations. This fact, if true, doesn't exactly fill me with joy or with pride for my species, but here we are. We apes stumbling into the digital frontier with one hand on the keyboard. Virtual spaces appear to be no different. One of the more widely known and immersive virtual spaces is called Second Life. I've read a few books on Second Life and watched a documentary film about it. The books and the film both indicate to me that some large percentage of Second Life's virtual spaces are adult-oriented, or specifically sexually explicit, and the majority of its revenues are derived from these sexually explicit areas. Linden Labs, the company who owns and operates Second Life, they tend to dance around this topic when their senior personnel are asked about it. I suppose they don't want to kill their golden goose. Many people, Gorean or otherwise, are drawn to online spaces that offer role-playing experiences. Second Life and other virtual platforms where individuals can explore different roles, dynamics, and identities. This phenomenon is particularly interesting as it offers a unique contrast to the values found in genuine, in-person connections and personal authenticity. So consider the difference between virtual roleplay and real-life meet-space connection. One of the most compelling aspects of this trend is its contrast with real-world relationships. While virtual spaces provide avenues for people to engage in roles and activities they may not pursue in everyday life, these interactions are inherently limited. online connections, though enticingly convenient, lack the depth, challenges, and rewards that come from face-to-face relationships. In real life, true bonds develop through shared experiences, physical presence, and the commitment to navigating life's ups and downs together. Authentic connection involves an investment of time, patience, and vulnerability that is difficult to replicate in a digital format. Virtual role-play offers a semblance of connection, but it can fall short of providing the same richness and accountability that an in-person relationship naturally fosters. There's also the matter of the space itself. So another aspect to consider is the difference between online environments and intentional, spiritual type spaces. People often turn to digital worlds to escape, but these spaces can lack the grounding influence found in spaces meant to cultivate personal growth and self-awareness. Virtual role-playing worlds, by nature, encourage a level of detachment from the realities of life, and may enable individuals to avoid engaging deeply with their inner selves. These spaces are frequently designed to keep people coming back, fostering an illusion of progress or fulfillment. However, intentional environments, whether physical or reflective, offer a space to explore genuine growth, face personal limitations, and strive for meaningful achievements that resonate in everyday life. Recognizing this difference can empower individuals to assess their time spent online and consider how much of it genuinely contributes to their well-being. With respect to the spaces themselves, though, the Gorean-inspired lifestyle I endeavor to practice recruits, develops, and cultivates beauty in a manifestly physical way. The limitations on lifestyle imposed by the Priest Kings cultivate a raw physical beauty and robustness out of necessity. Here on Earth, of course, one must deliberately engage in challenge in an unchallenging environment, and must practice some degree of asceticism in this era of plenty, in order to even approach the degree of vitality and beauty that too many forget is a necessary part of life. Consider also, though, the nature of identity. The act of crafting and embodying an alternate identity in online spaces can seem appealing, especially when this allows individuals to adopt traits or roles that may not align with their everyday lives. However, virtual identity building can blur the lines between who one is and who one might want to become. In exploring these virtual identities, people may inadvertently distance themselves from an authentic understanding of who they truly are and what they value. This can create a disconnect between one's digital persona and the true self, diluting the sense of identity that is essential for personal clarity and purpose. Authenticity is a pursuit that often requires introspection, acceptance, and self-compassion, none of which can be fully achieved in a fabricated environment. By focusing on identity as it is, rather than as it is digitally constructed, individuals have the opportunity to cultivate a self that aligns with their values and aspirations, free from the distortions of roleplay. One particularly pernicious influence that roleplay seems to have had on the wider culture, though I think this stems from many more sources than Second Life and other chat-based applications, is the automatic rules which are in place. In a video game, or some other immersive virtual environment, one may embody a character wholly different from who they are on Earth, and the entire virtual community they interact with, whether hard-coded as NPCs or threatened with a banhammer, as in the case of other players, they're essentially forced to recognize this identity as genuine. The problem is not the identity itself. Nobody after playing Mario Brothers expects anyone who isn't a Goomba to recognize him as a plumber. The problem is that the ease with which someone tries on a new identity, the lack of friction, the lack of feedback itself, that can become a habit that infects one's real life. Here on Earth, identity is a constant negotiation between individuals. It is not unilaterally asserted or claimed, and other people aren't NPCs programmed to accept or even to celebrate an identity of yours that appears to them to be incongruent with your physical being. Same goes for identities related to personal history, experience, or ability. Someone may identify as a fluent francophone, but if the question, quel genre de repas avez-vous mangé hier soir, elicits a blank stare, rather than a reply in the language of Molière, I not only am under no obligation to recognize his or her expertise in the French language, I must also understand that to recognize it where it exists not would be a deception of this person and of anyone else who's still under such an illusion. Francophone? No. At most, a francophile. Perhaps auto-francophile. I don't feel the need to embarrass this person or humiliate them, but on a human-to-human level, there is an instinct for a low tolerance of such incongruity. This instinct has become somewhat abated of late by the fluid approach to identity, which is currently fashionable, and while I don't want to sound like a member of the uptight citizens brigade, I think that immersive video games and immersive virtual spaces are moving the needle in the wrong direction on this matter. I can't really blame people, though. Sometimes real life just sucks. A significant factor driving people toward virtual roleplay is the desire to find freedom, purpose, or fulfillment that may feel lacking in their day-to-day lives. While this impulse is understandable, the truth is that true freedom and fulfillment can often be found by engaging more deeply with the real world rather than escaping into a virtual one. Online spaces offer temporary relief or distraction, but they cannot substitute the growth and joy that arises from building a purposeful, intentional life. Real fulfillment is often the result of choosing to face challenges, build relationships, and create lasting impact in the lives of others. Rather than turning to virtual environments to meet unfulfilled needs, one might instead examine what these desires reveal about their life path and explore ways to cultivate satisfaction in more grounded ways. This intentional approach can lead to a more sustainable, enriching experience, allowing for deeper connections and a more robust sense of purpose. If you don't believe this to be the case, try meditation. You take one deep breath per day, and you'll be in the top 1% of meditators in modern society. Recently, I've been prompted to consider the world of online RPG Gore, a digital environment where others explore elements of Gorean culture from a promotion standpoint for my collar-making enterprise, the Treven Forge. Although my experience is deeply rooted in real-life application, I'm curious about what might be gained from engaging with this online community. I have trouble respecting different expressions of Gorean philosophy. I know there are people who play it a little bit like a video game for a while, and then put it away and get back to their real life of working, dropping the kids off at soccer, cooking, cleaning, etc. I don't mean to disparage anybody, but Gorean philosophy itself is something of an injunction against indulging in roleplay in a virtual sense. I understand that this sounds a little rich in 2024, where nearly everyone meets online for relationship purposes, but imagine if people wanted to keep the relationship online. If one's approach to life is to be inspired by a Gorean aesthetic practice and aimed at cultivating the naturalistic, beautiful life, my instincts point me 180 degrees away from doing any of it through a screen with virtual avatars. There's also a very gendered aspect to this. As with many of the technological scourges of the 21st century, this affects men and boys much differently than it does women and girls. Consider what happens when a young man gets a smartphone into his hand. Some may wisely use it for business, promotion, or listening to podcasts, or books on tape. But many, many boys and men spend hours getting sucked into a vortex of phony accomplishments. They chase achievements in video games and conquer blondes in porn, rather than chasing excellence in real life, and their brain, or the part of their brain that makes them feel good about accomplishing things, doesn't seem to know the difference. Their ambition atrophies. Girls, on the other hand, when they get one of those glass rectangles in their hands, they spend a lot of time with the camera pointing towards themselves. One would think this results in vanity, amplification, and it certainly does. But that's the least of my worries. It opens the doors to all sorts of insecurities of comparison, not to mention possibilities for exploitation. In something like an inverse of what happens to boys' ambition, girls tune their need for attention to an unhelpful setting based on phony compliments, all the while amplifying their own flaws. While boys and girls and men and women can both drink each other's poison chalices, there's a difference in how they ruin their lives by staring into the shallowest of wells. I suspect that this difference is especially operant in the case of Second Life gore, and that the people who can simply treat it like a game and get back to real life for the other 23.5 hours of a day, or who treat it as a means to establish a connection and then move the relationship into real life, are in the minority. Now, people involved in Second Life gore roleplay, they engage in a wide variety of activities designed to mimic or explore the themes, relationships, and structure inspired by the fictional world of gore. Here are some of the core activities that SL gore roleplayers typically engage in. Character creation and development. Each participant creates a character, often choosing from roles inspired by Gorean society, such as free men, free women, slaves, merchants, warriors, etc. This process involves crafting a backstory, personality traits, and specific goals within the virtual world. Character development may also evolve over time as individuals interact and establish relationships with others. A central theme in Second Life gore roleplay is the exploration of social hierarchies. This often involves roleplaying as masters, mistresses, slaves, or other positions within Gorean society. Players engage in these dynamics through conversations, interactions, and scenarios that emphasize themes of dominance, submission, honor, and loyalty, according to their character's role and personality. Now, many players also create Gorean-inspired settings, such as cities, homes, and outdoor landscapes. These spaces are often modeled after locations described in the novels, reflecting a blend of fantasy and ancient civilizations. Players might engage in building or decorating these spaces, creating immersive environments where they can interact with other players. Participating in events and storylines. See, on Second Life, Go role players often organize events such as feasts, trading sessions like the Sardar Fair, or martial contests to deepen their engagement. These events might reflect scenes from Gorean society, like ceremonial gatherings or training exercises, giving players a chance to act out culturally significant rituals or formal interactions. Larger events may even involve complex, ongoing storylines, like conflicts between different factions or personal rivalries. Role players most often, though, engage in the more routine, everyday activities that reinforce the cultural structure and practices of the Gorean world. This includes role-playing domestic tasks, like hunting, trading goods, and caring for slaves, and managing a household. Players in slave roles may serve, entertain, or complete tasks as part of their day-to-day routine, while those in free roles might manage business, attend meetings, or maintain social relationships. This was one of the criticisms that Grim Jim had about Second Life Gore, that they don't go on a lot of adventures. He was trying to put together a Gorean RPG, more like Dungeons and Dragons, where people actually go out and, slay some cur and save the world and rescue princesses and stuff like that. But he said, no, most of these people, they just want to sit around and play house. His observation, not mine. Now, they do engage in combat. It's a fairly common aspect of Second Life Gore roleplay, with players acting out raids, duels, and battles. Many use scripts or systems within Second Life to simulate combat, such as weaponry, health, and defense mechanics. Adventure scenarios like quests or challenges also allow players to explore the world beyond city limits, often involving treasure hunts, rescues, or reconnaissance missions. Some players engage in scenarios that explore Gorean philosophy, discussing themes like honor, duty, gender roles, and societal structures in ways that reflect John Norman's works. These dialogues provide a means to explore Gorean concepts intellectually, sharing knowledge with others, and deepening the cultural immersion, fostering relationships and communities. I happen to think that the educational and cultural aspect of any sort of online roleplay is probably its shiniest pearl. There is also a relationship building aspect, as players form bonds that mirror Gorean alliances, friendships, or fealty. Players might join or form communities, participate in familial or guild-like structures, and develop friendships or partnerships within these groups. Many engage in long-term roleplay relationships where characters navigate loyalty, rivalry, or romantic connections over time. Many SL Gore communities have established codes of conduct to ensure that interactions reflect the intended atmosphere of the roleplay. These rules define expected behaviors, appropriate language, and the boundaries between real life and roleplay. For example, there might be guidelines about staying in character, respecting the roles and boundaries of others, and maintaining decorum within the Gorean setting. There is one aspect of the good life, or even the good Gorean life, which online spaces may facilitate. That is the art of the argument. Of course, even this is better done in person. I happen to think that argument is mankind's highest art form, and that Goreans, as a fringe minority with unacceptable views, are well positioned both to engage in high-quality arguments and would do well to hone this skill. What do you think? Is online role-playing something you engage in? Or is it a waste of time? Is it a part of the downfall of society, a new Tower of Babel, which is fracturing humans into mutually unintelligible identities? Or is it a harmless indulgence? Or is it the most meaningful part of your day? I don't know, but I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for joining me again this morning. Lads, if she doesn't put down that phone when you come into the room and smile for you, take away her phone privileges for a few hours. Lasses, if you think your master is spending too much time at his desk, crawl under it and ask him if he can think of something better to do, but be sure to speak directly into the mic. In a future episode, I'll be going into the art of the argument. The books have more than a little argument in their dialogue, but the books themselves are an argument for something beautiful. Would you also argue on their behalf? However, pray join me again next week, where I'll go into the topic of cultivation of one's property, particularly the two-legged, beautiful possessions. I hope you'll find plenty of value here for men who own women, and also for men who would like to. In the meantime, fair winds, happy trails.